I'm Leon Todd for G66. Welcome to another Tuesday Tone Tip. On today's video, I want to show you my grab-and-go bass preset on the VP4. There's just been a public beta release of Firmware 4 for the VP4, which adds loads of bass-friendly features, including new tracking modes in the synth and ring mod block, which we're going to feature in here. But most importantly, my favorite bass effect ever, the Sansamp bass driver, has now been added to the drive block. Now, the real Sansamp pedal is designed to be run DI or as a preamp, and we have models of both of those modes in here. We've got the no amp bass DI, so this has a little cab sim baked into it, perfect for running direct like I am here. If you're gonna run into the front of a bass amp, try the no amp bass pre. That removes the cab sim in there. Let's take a look at what we've got across these four scenes on here, because I've basically set it up for a rock bass sound, then with some more drive. Then I've got an octave effect from the ring modulator block, and we'll talk about why I've done that a little bit later. And then a very gnarly sounding bass synth. We'll start on scene one. Using the Sansamp makes it so easy to get that core DI tone on here. Let's actually have a listen to the DI sound of my bass, which is pretty unremarkable. Then I'll bring in the no amp bass DI. You can see I've got the drive at 5, the bass at 7, the treble at 6, and the level down at 3. I've also turned down the presence a little bit. These settings are going to vary wildly depending on the type of bass you're using. I'm using a passive bass with quite low output pickups on here. What I've had to do to get a lot of drive out of this is I've actually turned up the level in the input 1 block. I'd recommend running this at 0 though if you're using an active bass. For example, say you had an Ernie Ball Music Man Stingray with that big beefy preamp in it. You can go a lot lighter on the drive in here and you don't need that input boost. But for now, I've got this. Then I'm just running the VCA modern compressor with the ratio at 4 to level things out a little bit on there. So that's the core tone, and if I was doing a bass gig, I'd probably live on that 90% of the time. The more scene in here uses channel B in the drive block. It's that same no amp bass DI. I've just added more drive, more presence, and treble on there to make it a little bit more aggressive. This would be great if you wanted a bit of an extra boost, if you were the only other stringed player in the band. For example, if you were playing in a 3-piece, 1 bass, 1 guitar, and drums, and the guitar player takes a solo, you can beef everything up on here. And I really like this for more of the kind of faster picked bass stuff. I cannot play with my fingers to save my life, so just bear with me as I run through some of that. again, if you had an active bass, you can get way more drive out of this. You could scoop out the mid-range on there, boost that presence, and get a very modern bass tone out of it, especially if you use the blend control on there. But I'm just using it as a stand-in preamp here. So if I was using this scene for 90% of the gig, I'd probably be on this for 5% of the gig when there's a guitar player doing a solo. And then for the other 5%, I'd split my time between these two very funky sounds. The first one is using the ring modulator for an octave effect. Now, you could use the pitch block to get a very pristine octave effect on there. You could use the octave divider type. You could use the dual shift on there so that you could say have an octave down and an octave up, or an octave up and a fifth up if you wanted to emulate some power chords. But there's this new tracking mode in the ring modulator which tracks low enough for bass guitar on here. So I've turned that on. The options are bass or guitar. Then if you set pitch tracking on and the ratio to 0.5, this will give you an octave down effect, but it's kind of a very funky, inaccurate octave effect. But I think it works really well on bass guitar just to add some grit and character on here. Have a listen to this. Fun thing to do would be to combine that with, say, the envelope filter on there, or a phaser or a flanger. Again, you've got so many great effects to choose from. My fourth scene is using the Synth-Block though, and I love a dirty bass synth on here. So what I've done for voice 1 and voice 2, I've chosen the sawtooth type, and I have just offset the tuning a tiny amount, so up 3 cents and down 3 cents on them. I've also used a little bit of filtering in here. And then for voice 3, I'm using a square wave down an octave on there. This is a classic combination on here. I've also set the tracking mode for bass. The mix is at 50%, and you can just get so many great dirty sounds out of this. This is with the less mode, so channel A on the drive block, but if you wanted even more grit, try it in combination on channel B and turn that ring mod on as well. The synth sounds really fun with a phaser on there. And of course, you could add anything like a flanger, a chorus. You could add delay and reverb to your tone on there and place it anywhere that you like in the signal chain. You can also play around with the different routing options on there. For example, if you wanted that Sansamp in parallel with the compressor so that you can have your clean sound intact but heavily compressed and then add a whole bunch of grit on there. There's other models like the Royal Bass DI. That's a really nice one if you want a big fat warm sound. There's of course the Black Glass DI in there, which is great for those modern bass drive sounds as well. But I just love this Sansamp on here. You know, you can just go to the drive level, a little bit of EQ on there, and you have this record ready or gig ready bass tone on there, a little bit of massaging with the compressor, and then some funky effects up front, and you've got an amazing DI bass rig out of the VP4. If you're using the VP4 or any other Fractal product on bass guitar, please let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to know what you're using. And if you'd like to see more bass focused videos, maybe I'll work on my chops and actually figure out how to play with my fingers and get a different bass in here so that we can play around with a couple of different tones. Until next time though, I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll see you on the next one.